So good day, friends. This is Dr. Bob Hamilton, and you have tuned in today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Today's conversation is going to be a very, very important topic because we're talking about collisions. We're talking about car collisions and making kids safe if that ever happens, God forbid. So before we dive into the show, I do want to say thank you for all of you who have tuned in today. It means a lot to me. You guys are busy people, and I thank you for taking the time to be here. We do encourage you to pass this show on to friends and family. My hope is that on a weekly basis, we bring people before you who are giving out practical information that you can actually put to use on a day-by-day basis for the good and the betterment of your children. And today is no exception, friends. It is a great pleasure to welcome to the studio today Dr. Jim DeCarli. He wears a lot of hats, this guy. He's got a lot of stuff going on. In his educational journey has taken him through USC, George Washington University in Washington, D.C., University of Oxford in England. And he has a Ph.D., but he is also now become very much an expert in car seat safety. And he has a company. We can talk about this company. It is called Pro Car Seat Safety. You can find that at procarseatsafety.com. And he has lots to say about car seats, how to put them in, and we're going to talk about all those different things. And first of all, let me welcome Dr. Jim DeCarli to the Hamilton Review.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton, for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. And so, Jim, what I like to do is I usually give my guests a moment to back up and talk about your life, talk about who you are, where you're from, the things that impacted you, and why you're doing what you're doing, because this is an interesting journey that you've been on. So, Jim DeCarli, Dr. DeCarli, the microphone belongs to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. So yes, my area, I do work in public health. I develop behavioral interventions in the work that I do. I'm a trained injury and neuroepidemiologist. The programs that I develop in public health are both intentional and unintentional injuries. And intentional injuries are going to be youth violence, suicide, those areas. But the unintentional is where there's falls, poisoning, suffocations, and car seats with motor vehicle injuries. So I started out in public health when working in infectious disease. That was my interest, and I have continued with that. I got more involved in the injury side when I started working as a behavioral epidemiologist with the county health department. And as I was developing programs, we saw a lot of gaps where we could bring in psychology and neuroscience. And that's why when I went on for further studies, because I wanted to create programs that are not only evidence-based, but also we could create them to where parents could actually learn from and benefit from. And that brings me to the research that we most recently did and published in applying behavioral skills training to car seat education and the way we deliver training to parents. So when I started doing this, I was involved in a lot of areas of car seats. And when I started, I was with the California Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which I still am. I'm a co-lead with the Office of Traffic Safety Coordinators and the Department of CHP. And we create different programs for occupant protection to keep children safe in cars. With that program, we've been trying to reduce misuse. Misuse of car seats have been a common problem since the early 90s and continuing to be a problem throughout the 2000s to currently. Been in published literature many of times. Unfortunately, we have not had programs that do outcome evaluation, meaning that when we have a program like, for example, a car seat fitting station, and parents come and we have certified technicians teach them, those have not been evaluated mainly because of the cost and some of the issues around that. We've been able to create a program so we can do the outcome evaluation and we can do these. And what we were learning is that parents still get a lot of information overload. They're not really able to comprehend to give them the skills that they need to install car seats. And as we know, and we've demonstrated in our research, most parents that do feel like they're installing their car seat correctly, a lot of parents come to us, they install the car seat, they're looking at the instructions of the car seat owner's manual, the motor vehicle owner manual, which we do recommend. They've looked at YouTube videos from the car seat manual owner's car seat company, and unfortunately, misuse is still very high.
No, I think you mentioned in your in our pre-call conversation that if you do a survey, 96% of people think that they have installed their car seat correctly. But when you look and you get a little bit granular and detailed, about 75 to 90% of them are lacking. And that is just a number that just is so radically variant with the truth. And speak to that for a moment, because I think that people do, obviously people love their children. They want to do this right. They understand the importance of car seats. But why is there such a mismatch there?
So yeah, it is true. I mean, in our study, and previous studies have shown a very high percentage of parents that feel very confident with their car seat. With our study of over 2,500 expectant parents, when we did our baseline studies, those parents also reported feeling somewhat confident with their car seat. But we did see, and somewhat meant between a range from 75 to 95%. But we are seeing misuse between 75 up to even 95%.
So those are big numbers, and I'm shocked by that. I want to back up just a second, just to get some context here. Jim, when I was a kid, which was a long time ago, I know, we would drive around with no car seats, with no seat belts. We had a station wagon, and we would literally kind of jump. There were 5 in our family, and we would kind of jump, from the front seat to the back seat, and then we had like this open area in the station wagon that we would kind of go. It's like a playroom in the car almost, and we would go back there, and we would kind of lay on that or go to sleep or whatever. And there were no car seats. I mean, there were no seat belts. Start with that. And there were no car seats, certainly. Can you give a little context in terms of how far we've come with that, number one, and how many lives have been saved as a result of these instituted regulations?
So, sure. So with with car seat manufacturers, with the motor vehicle design for number one, motor vehicle design, we have crumple zones, airbags, and these are really increasing the occupant protection. Car seat designs have changed significantly, even in the last 10 to 15 years, and specifically over the older car seats. Years ago, when there were no car seats, as long as you were not in a crash, you're going to be fine. So we do have a lot of people that will say, when I was little, we never used a car seat or even wore a seatbelt. Obviously, we were never in a serious collision, because if you were in a serious collision, you were not here. When I was young, we had a cabin down in Baja California, and there was a house. My parents, I remember, the time my parents said I was like 5 or 6 years old when this happened. Middle of the night, we heard, and our house was up on a cliff that dropped down about 150 feet. And there was a car that went straight off along our house, right off the cliff, down into the rocks. And I still remember at 5.5 years old, hearing children crying. I heard it all night long. And I still remember being that young, hearing those babies crying. And my parents later, as I got older, told me they were looking for the kids, because when the car went off, the kids were all ejected once it landed, because they're not wearing seatbelts. There's no car seats. Well, this wasn't that long ago. There were car seats, but down in Mexico, sometimes they're not wearing the car seats and they don't have the regulation that we have. And so children will fly out, and that's what happened there. So very big difference when we have occupant protection. We also have car seats now that are designed to keep children at each stage much longer. Car seats, even rear facing for infants, installing and using those correctly can save about 71% of deaths. So we can be 71% safer when you're restraining the child properly with the infant seats, and then it goes up to mid 80s when they're forward facing, and then about the same for when they're in a booster seat. So these seats are shown to be extremely effective in saving lives and reducing injuries.
And the injuries you're talking about are what kind of injuries happen when kids are not properly restrained?
Anything from, it depends on what position they're in at the time of the collision, also the type and speed of the collision, whether it's side impact, rear or front. But with younger children, often prematurely going forward facing. But with rear facing children, there's suffocation, there's C-spine injuries, brain injury, C-spine injury on the neck from the head coming forward, going when they're forward facing too soon, and brain injury from the head coming back into the seat. And then also, when we get to the forward facing seat and not wearing the chest clip high enough, level with the armpits, then we're seeing a lot of spinal cord injury and brain injury from those older children as well that need to be in those 5-point harness correctly. And then as they get a little bit older, then we're also seeing when they're wearing a booster seat or a lap shoulder belt, and the seatbelt is either hitting their neck, so they put it under their arms. So then you're at a higher risk of injuries to the rib, to lungs from being punctured by the lungs. So that happens quite often in those collisions. So wearing these restraints properly are going to reduce injury significantly. So it's the brain injury, the spinal cord injury to the ribs as they get a little bit older, and also lung injuries. We also do have suffocation as well when they're not positioned right or not using the newborn insert correctly as well. So there's numerous of them depending on the position that the children.
So friends, this is serious stuff, and this is why car seats they have been a incredible lifesaver. And all pediatricians, we talk about car seats all the time because they're critical, and so this is a very important thing. Now, I do want to get into a little bit of your recommendations, because you are you're kind of very detailed about how the graduation, I guess, of car seats from the time that a child is an infant to when they're teenagers. Can you kind of walk through where you begin with car seats and the ages and the weights and different things and the different transitions? Because obviously your kid is not going to be in a rear-facing car seat until they're going to college, right? So there's a progression here. So I'm going to turn the mic back over to you and have you walk through that. This is important information, friends.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. So we start off with the infant seat, and these are rear-facing seats. So we're in the rear-facing position. All your rear-facing car seats, or their convertible seats, the infant seat that's rear-facing only, then there's a convertible seat that's rear-facing, then later it turns forward-facing. All those convertible seats that are rear-facing keep children rear-facing between 40 and some go up to 50 pounds. All of them go up 40 pounds. There's about 29 on the market that go to 50 pounds, and that's rear-facing. So we look at the CDC clinical growth charts, we see that that's going to be on average between 3 to 5 years old, that children can stay rear facing. Car seats are being designed to keep them each stage longer, as I mentioned earlier. So rear facing car seat at between 40 to 50 pounds, they'll be able to stay rear facing between 3 to 5 years old. And depending on the type of car seat you have as well. But that's generally how long they're going to be able to stay rear facing. A lot of parents worry about, my baby's getting big, their feet are up on the back seat, they're getting crunched, they look uncomfortable. The feet aren't an issue. The issue is, and the reason car seats are keeping children rear facing longer, is because anytime you put a child forward facing, regardless of their age, they're at a higher risk of head injury and neck injury from the head coming forward, and brain injury from the head going back into the seat. Because once you put them forward facing, there's nothing else protecting their head and the neck. So if all passengers, even adults, were rear facing, we would have significantly less severe injuries and car crashes. But car seats are designed to go much higher now, so we're able to keep them rear facing much longer. Like with my little girl, she made it a month past her 5th birthday because we had the Kleckfump and the Nunarava. She was able to stay in that. Our state CPS coordinator was the same thing. Her child was able to stay at a higher age because of her weight. That was giving him more head and neck protection. So once you turn them forward facing, once they get to that maximum weight, and most of the car seats are the weight for when it goes rear facing to forward facing.
And that weight, Jim, to interject, is what is that weight usually?
So if you look on the side of the seat, they're always going to be color coded, and you're going to see rear facing, and you want to pay attention to there's the lower anchors of the latch or the seat belt. Now, lower anchors of the latch and the seat belt, they're just two different ways of installing a car seat. These are some of the errors that we get with parents, but the lower anchors of the latch were required in all vehicles and all cars manufactured 2002 onward. This was to help standardize putting in car seats and reducing errors. Back then, car seats were only used up until about 40 pounds, and there were no other car seats for children, which is very different now. So they crash tested those lower anchors at 65 pounds combined weight of the seat and child. So a heavier seat, like with the Kleck that's 40 pounds, when your baby's 25 pounds, you no longer can use the lower anchors. You're having to use the seat belt. So that's something really to keep in mind when you're talking about the latch or the seat belt. And so when we're transitioning and you're having the rear facing going into forward facing, we are going to be mostly using the seatbelt because there is that weight limitation. So at that point, you'll be using the seatbelt. But there is part of the latch system, the top tether when it's forward facing, that you will also use. And that helps reduce the amount of head excursion, protecting the head and the neck.
And that typically begins, okay, so you say about 3 to 5 years, you're talking about rear facing, he goes forward facing, and then you talk about the 5-point harness. This is important. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
So your 5-point harness is also, this is going to be on the seats when it's rear facing and forward facing. This keeps the child's upper torso in place so they're not moving around. After you're done with the rear facing seat, depending whether it's a 40 or 50 pounds, then that same seat goes forward facing. Those forward facing seats with the 5-point harness usually go up until 65 pounds. That's usually going to be about 7 years old on average, could be up to 8. It just depends. Usually children exceed the height much sooner before the weight. The height is going to be important because when we were talking about rear facing, those harness straps, you want to have those at or below the shoulders. When it's forward facing, they're at or above. So when you have these forward facing seats and they go up to 65 pounds, children usually exceed the height. And the way you know that is because they're going to reach to the top level of the harness strap, and those straps have to be at or above. So once their shoulders reach it, you're having to take and transition to a booster seat at that point. And so at 7 or 8, at 65 pounds, you go into the booster seat, and then children stay in the booster seat until they can fit into the lap shoulder belt properly. Now, remember, vehicle seats are all different. So some children will be able to transition to the seat belt much sooner than others, depending how big the seat is. So if you have, like I have a Mustang, and my daughter at 9 years old could fit in the lap shoulder belt properly without the booster seat. But in the Suburban, needed it up until 12 years old because the seats are much larger.
Okay.
So children can stay in those until they pass. We have this on the website, the 5-step test, so we can determine if the lap belt's staying on their lap and the shoulder straps crossing the center of their chest. If they're seated that properly, that's fine. If they're sitting in the vehicle seat and the lap belt's up on their stomach or their shoulder straps touching their chest, then they'll need to be in a booster seat.
So, okay, so this is not trivial, friends. You have to kind of be thinking about this, and as your child gets older and older, you need to make those transitions appropriately. That at the point where they are safely tethered and so something bad doesn't happen. In terms of going from a child from the back seat to the front seat, when does that typically happen, James?
So a lot of older cars before like the 90s and early before 2010, you would notice on the sun visor, it would say children 12 and under in the safer in the back seat. Now, no longer see that. Normally, you will see children safer in the back seat with no age. And that's because children and airbags and seatbelts often do not mix because they're not fitting in there properly. So your airbags, remember, they're designed to, when they deploy, The seatbelt's designed to meet, as a seatbelt stretches with the body in it, they're going to meet that airbag. When you have a child that's not quite big enough for the seatbelt, they're going to go out too far, and the airbag usually is too much strong, too strong for the child. There has been cases where we've had a 16-year-old one in Michigan that was a 17-year-old that was in a crash and completely decapitated in the front seat. And there was another case in one of our studies in the UK that was 16, and she was completely blind in the front seat. The airbag hit her, and one of her eyesight did come back, but she's still blind in one eye. These airbags come out they have smart airbags now to determine the weight of the passenger. So between 160 and over 240 miles an hour. So they're very strong. These do save adults. Adults do get injured, but they're not getting killed like children do. So we want to make sure children stay in the back seat. So it's best to keep children in the back seat as long as you can, because you want to keep them away from the airbag. If you have a 5-passenger car and you have 4 children, one child has to sit in the front seat. You want to push that front seat, put the oldest child in the front seat, push that seat all the way back so it's further away from the airbag. Make sure they're able to ride in the seatbelt properly. And again, we're only talking about those in seatbelts in the front seat, not with any car seats.
So the airbag, this is something that we think about in pediatrics, is that airbags are great and then they're not so great with kids. So I think that this is a good explanation that when this airbag is coming at you really, really fast, and a lot of people have broken ribs and other issues, trauma from the airbag. Forget about the wreck. They're dealing with the airbag. So that's a big deal. And obviously, we love airbags because they have saved innumerable lives, but for kids, they can also be that story you just told is absolutely unbelievable.
Also speak on behalf of that while we're talking about airbags. A lot of parents worry about the side impact, the side airbags, which are curtain airbags on the sides, worrying about, is that going to affect the car seat? Well, these are different than the front airbags that come back. Your curtain airbags expand about 3 to 4 inches, and they go down the side of the window. So it's not impacting either of the car seat. That's actually something safe for them.
Yeah.
So we have smart airbags in the front seats, and those smart airbags sense the weight of the passenger. And that tells the smart airbag how fast for that front airbag to deploy. So when we have rear-facing car seats, you want to make sure there's space between the back of the car seat and the front seats. You want to make sure they're not pressed up against. In Europe, they're designed to actually have those pressed up against, but here they're not. You want to have about a finger's width between the 2 seats. And that's because in a crash, you want it to be able to move to absorb impact. And that way it's not going to affect the front passenger. So if you have a car seat tied up against it and you have a 110-pound passenger in the front seat, that normally the airbag would deploy at 160 miles an hour. If it's tied up against the seat, it might think that passenger is 200 pounds and it'll come out at 250 miles an hour.
Okay.
So we want to make sure
that's an important point. So the car seat and the back seat should not be resting on the actual front seat. Okay, that's a very important point. Now, how many are all new cars installed with smart airbags?
Most of them now are. You have cars that will have 18 to 20 airbags in some vehicles. So there's numerous airbags in different locations on the seat, on the sides of the seat, on the sides of the passenger seat. Sometimes the passenger seat's in the back. Sometimes they're up on the sidewall. So yeah, most of them do, and most of them are smart airbags because they do sense the speed and also the weight of the passenger and the occupant. I'm not sure if there's any in the back seat. These are all for the front seat, but there are airbags in the back that do have individual sensors, but those are speed.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned is that we talked about is straps are important, and straps that are twisted. In particular, people kind of go, the straps that are, but a twisted strap is not a good strap. Why is that?
So your seatbelts are woven to absorb impact. So whether you're wearing a seatbelt or whether that car's seat's installed with the seatbelt or you're using a lap shoulder belt in a booster seat, or just wearing the seatbelt. You want to make sure that is flat. If it's twisted, it's not going to stretch and absorb impact. So these are woven so it can stretch during a collision. So you want to make sure they are flat. Those on a baby as well, on the 5-point harness, same reason. You want them to be able to move to absorb impact so the child doesn't feel the entire force of a collision.
Which is something you don't necessarily think about. You just think about that they're restraining, but you don't think about the idea of expansion, which is something very powerful. Jim, you make a big point about installation. And one of the things that you said to me, and I found it to be interesting, is that you actually show people how to install the car seats. And I'm curious, can you just tell us why that is, that it's important that the parents themselves actually do it?
Right. So there's been a few studies to show that hands-on is more important in increasing knowledge, and so parents actually understanding and installing car seats. We found with a lot of parents there, even though we will demonstrate for the parent and then have the parent install it, and we guide them through it and they install it. When we went back in our study at 9 months, we were finding that parents were forgetting everything that we taught them. They were forgetting about how to test the seat, forgetting about when to reinstall it or make the adjustments as the child grows. So when we're doing the installation now, we use behavioral skills training. These are different methods now that we, in our longitudinal study that we wanted to confirm how effective it is. We found that when we're teaching child passenger safety, just like the national curriculum that any certified technician teaches parents on car seat installation, by us using behavioral skills training, what we're doing, there's 4 procedures. So we're providing instructions to the parent, and then we provide the modeling, which means we break this up and we model what we want the parent to do. Then the parent actually rehearses that. And then we give them feedback as they're installing. But we break this up into very small components, so we're not just giving them everything all at once. So we want to make sure that we, as technicians, we are actually teaching the parent. Sometimes we do get parents that if they have some physical disability or something they're not able to, we ask them, do you have somebody who, a friend or a family member that helps you? And they usually say yes. And then those are the ones we get and we train them. So they have somebody to call on when we leave. So we teach the parent like how to test the seat. If it's coming loose and they're not physically able to do it, they can call somebody to be able to help them. But we want to make sure that parent or caregiver is actually learning. So when we do this with parents, we're guiding them. We have step-by-step, whether we're using the seatbelt or the latch, make sure that this car seat's level. We go through the installation. We show them where and how to test it, what to look for when they're so in case they have to reinstall it, they know what to do. So we want to make sure they fully understand that.
This is important. And so I think that, we all obviously new parents know that they have to buy a car seat. This is the law. Actually, you can't take a child out of the hospital without a car seat in these days, which I completely agree with. But it's also important that it be done correctly. And Dr. DeCarli, you are the guy to do it. You're the guy to at least instruct the parents how to do it. I'm looking at our time here. We're going to be wrapping up in a second here, but how do people find you, Dr. DeCarli?
So I can be contacted and reached at procarseatsafety.com. And we also have our hotline number. We have the National Car Seat Hotline that we have put together. That's 323-491-6197. So if you want to talk with a technician, you can call that number anytime if you have questions. And then we can get routed to, if you need assistance, we do have the mobile service where we come to their house or we come to the hospital. We do try to get expectant parents to contact us no less than 4 to 6 weeks of their due date, so we can make sure they learn and understand their car seat. Especially we go through some of the specifics with newborns. And we go through a lot more with the expectant parents as far as with head positioning and breathing and sleeping and using the newborn insert. And we go through all of that with them. And so they can contact us at procarseatsafety.com or at the National Car Seat Hotline at 323-491-6197. If they go to the website, you'll be able to see a link to it plus the phone number.
So he's readily available. That email address again is pro car seat CARSCAT safety. That is one word, procarseatsafety.com, and you can find him there. Dr. DeCarli spells his name DE capital CARLI. James DeCarli, and that number again is 323-491-6197. Friends, this is a very important issue, and sometimes we have a tendency, oh yeah, we got a car seat, and we talk about it quickly, and we should spend a moment or two, a little bit longer, in really making sure that what we have done, if you have any kind of tool, if that tool is not effectively, appropriately used, that tool is ineffective. And car seats, we're talking about your lovely boys and girls who you adore. And so doing it right is really critical. And so this is important information. So we're going to end it there. Dr. DeCarli, you have been a wealth of good information here. Again, he's available at procarseatsafety.com. He's someone you should call and chat with. Some of my patients have, and they have been extremely happy, which is how I found Dr. DeCarli, by the way. So thank you for taking the time to come over here and be on the Hamilton Review today.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton, for having me.
And friends, take this to heart. Car seats are important, and doing it right is even more important. So thank you for listening today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. We don't want you ever to collide in your car without a properly installed car seat, okay? And friends, until next time, be well, be safe. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Tune in again next week on Apple Podcast. Rate and comment and tell a friend.